Yay. All right. We're live. Going to have some words with you today. I should be outside doing other things, but first things first. About a week ago, I could go check, but I'm not going to. About a week ago, I did a video on this channel about the problem in Spain. And I talked about that the Valencia region in Spain got hammered. And I did another video yesterday or so saying that 10 days later, another region of Spain got hammered. And these are massive floods. The situation in Valencia was just really over the top. Cars, go back and look at it. Check it out. Go on YouTube or just do a Google search and just get the images. The images alone you just come away gobsmacked. It's like, wow, is this even real? Was this AI generated? Where are these images come from? Yeah, it's real. Cars piled up to the second floor in the streets in the region of Valencia. But now we have to come back and revisit this. And I'm going to talk specifically about why we have to revisit Valencia. And then I'm going to generalize from that because I'm really not into climate doom porn. Okay. I'm really not into celebrating all the terrible things that happen, the storms and the cyclones and the floods and the heat waves and everything else. To me, this is just data. And one of the things I'm interested in addition to what the planet is trying to do to us, which I can sum up very quickly, the planet is trying to kill us and is becoming somewhat successful in that endeavor. So, you better tuck that away in the back of your head because that's the thing. And then the other thing is how people respond to this. I'm interested in that because there's a weird intersection crossing of a bunch of different themes that I'm curious how this is going to be resolved. I just don't get it. The setup here, the setup and how we're acting and the kind of leadership we're getting or the lack of it, or even just the lies and deceits, just the setup here is really fascinating to me. So what is the setup? We have an entire science community, a lot of people doing science. Okay. And climate science is a multidisciplinary area of work. So you get people studying the cryosphere, the biosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, all of it. And all these different people, PhDs and whole teams, and getting grants and studying the melting of the ice and doing imagery from space. It's just amazing the number of people that are working on this stuff. The IPCC process, which we've had, 6 reports? That's how close I'm keeping up. We do like these reports like every 6 or 7 years. And when they do an IPCC report, they summarize the official peer-reviewed scientific literature, and they incorporate tens of thousands of papers from tens of thousands of teams or individuals doing work. It's just a huge undertaking. So on the one hand, we have this one group of humanity that's studying the hell out of this and becoming, just so you understand, increasingly alarmed by what they're seeing, increasingly terrified by what they are seeing. Data. It's data. It's not, oh, this is going to be terrible. And, think of the children. Data. The data is looking horrific. It's looking like a nightmare scenario. It's like everything that could possibly go wrong. Even the wildest flights of fancy of how bad it could be, that's actually on deck. The wildest things that people could come up with in a fever dream, like, well, it could do this or it could do that. That shit's actually happening. And people are losing their minds in the scientific community. This is a real big problem for those guys. So as that group of people is going forward, trying to make a difference, trying to raise alarm, trying to share with people what they're seeing, data. All right. There's a whole nother group of people on the capitalist side of things, corporations and whatever, on the government side of things, on the nonprofit side of things, on the NGOs side of things, on the UN side of things. There's all these whole different bunch of players who are seeing the data, reading the IPCC reports, looking at the summaries, seeing the prognostications and the projections and the whatever else. And they're just going all these different directions. And the hoi polloi, right? Joe Blow, and Jane Sixpack, the people who aren't scientists, aren't politicians, don't have money, don't have power, don't have influence, don't understand what's happening, don't have the time to have it explained to them, couldn't do anything about it if they understood. These people, right? Which is like the balance of humanity, 99.999% of humanity. They're completely bewildered. They just don't get it. They don't get it. And I don't blame them. I would never tell somebody who doesn't understand this topic that they were dummies. Well, I mean, they might be. Well, okay, I'll tell you one thing that's dumb. This is one thing you don't want to do. And if you do this, you're a dummy. Don't take your leadership from politicians as regards climate change and global heating. Now, you can take your leadership from politicians on everything else. Everything political, everything economics, everything religious. You can take all the guidance you want from politicians and spiritual leaders and economists. That's fine, because all that stuff is made up. It's all fake. And they just make it up as they go. So you may as well get your direction from them because they own those areas, politics, economics, and religion. They're just going to lie to you and make shit up, and you're going to be okay with that. But don't take any of your leadership from these people, politicians, economists, and religious figures as regards climate change. Because climate change, and I don't even call it that, I call it global heating, because that's what it really is. I mean, you'd be lucky if all you got was some climate change. Wow, you'd win the lottery if all you had was some climate change. No, you're getting global heating along with the rest of us. Thank you very much. And that shit is physics. That's physics. And why would you why would you talk to a politician about physics? Why would you do that? Why would you talk to a religious leader about physics? Because that's what you're doing when you're getting advice about global heating and climate change from economists. They're not weighing in on the physics. They don't understand it any more than the 99.99% of humanity that doesn't understand it. Economists and politicians and religious figures are pulled from the general population, and they only know what they read in the papers. They only know what happened to them yesterday, personal experience wise, and the rest of it is just all gobbledygook. And that's fine because it's science and it's difficult and it's math and charts and figures and statistics and photos from space. And yeah, okay, fine. You don't get it? Yeah, I understand that you don't get it. That's not even your fault you don't get it. It's not your wheelhouse. But that's why you need to pay attention to what the scientists are saying, because it is in their wheelhouse. And then we got the politicians saying, oh my God, you can't listen to the scientists. They have an agenda. Oh, they do. I don't know what their agenda is, but I know they have one. Okay. And they're going to steer you astray, and you're going to have to give up your diesel truck and your guns and your flag and your everything else because conspiracies, right? That's what the politicians are saying. And let's face it, for most people, and I would have to say, from my experience, most Americans, like what? Like 95% of Americans, I don't think I've ever met a person, certainly not in my neighborhood, who expressed an understanding or even an acceptance. Yep, it's real. It's really happening. I don't think I've ever met a single person. And I live in a wealthy neighborhood with educated people who had professional lives. These aren't gap-toothed hillbillies, who drink themselves drunk every night. These are wealthy, respectable, professional, many retired, but still, people with degrees, college degrees. I don't think I've ever met one person who ever expressed a simple acceptance of the science, just simply accepted the science as science. Well, if that's what they're saying, well, they know what they're talking about. That's their wheelhouse. So I guess it's a thing. Maybe it'll change a bit in the future. Maybe it'll evolve, but probably, yeah, they're probably right. There probably is. The planet is heating, and so I'll just accept that. I don't think I've met one person in my wealthy white neighborhood who ever felt that way. I'm sure there are people in this country of America who do accept climate science. I've never met one. I've never met one. Not my own children, not my biological family, nobody. Nobody. They don't believe it. Well, the people in Spain are those kind of people. Fine. They're just normal people. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being normal. Nothing wrong with being average. Okay. Nothing. Whatever wrong with that. Period. Straight up. Enough said. People in Spain got whacked by global heating. And they know that. They got torrential rains that were simply off the hook. Now, what was the statistic? They got one in this region of Spain, Valencia. You know, Spain is not a rainforest, right? In this region of Valencia, they got 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours. A year's worth of rain in 5 hours. You didn't know that. If you live in Spain, you probably don't know that. They got 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours. And the next day, you see pictures coming across of cars piled up in the streets, piled up, car on top of car on top of car, up to the second floor in Valencia, Spain. If you saw that, you think that must be Photoshop. That must be fake. That must be a fake picture. How? Wait, that must be fake. No, it's not. That must be generated by AI. That can't be real. Yeah, it's real. I'll tell you something else that's real too. They got 1 year worth of rain in 5 hours. And there you go. So, again, I don't really care that they got 5 inches of rain. They got one, gotta be careful here, 1 year of rain in 5 hours. What was it, 20 inches or so? Probably. Spain's not that wet, right? It's not the Amazon. They don't get, or Southeast Asia, they don't get 600 millimeters of rain a year. They're getting, 20 centimeters, right? 1 year in 5 hours. And the people in Spain don't even know that. When the king of Spain came to visit them, you know what? He's the king of Spain, right? We would like to see the king. He shows up. I wish America had a king, right? So we wouldn't have to deal with all these clusterfuck politicians. We could have our king. He could be nice, right? He could be a nice guy. He could have a queen, and she could be nice. They'd be nice people because they don't have to be sons of bitches to be king. You just have to be born king. You're born king, right? So you're basically pulled from the average population, and politicians are not pulled from the average population. Politicians are pulled from the population of grifters, liars, con artists, thieves, rapacious philanderers. That's your political class. That's how they get to be in politics. They do it for the money. They'll lie about it. They'll cheat and steal. They'll throw their opponents under the bus or in a gulag or have them executed or hung from a lamppost or whatever they have to do. That's your political class, not pulled from the general population. But the king and queen probably are, because they were just born to the job. They're born. It's almost like picking somebody at random to be king. So you think that the king would be a beloved figure, and the king would be very sympathetic, and you couldn't blame the king for anything, because the king isn't a politician, isn't an economist, is not a religious leader, isn't even a scientist, doesn't know anything about the data, didn't know what's going on, just heard about it like you did on the TV, right? So the king shows up. And what did they do in Spain? What do they do with the king of Spain when he shows up in Valencia and tries to, what's he do? Make people feel better? Listen to the people, right? As a non-political figure, just listen to the people as a neutral, kind of like your neighbor next door, right? He's kind of the neighbor next door, because he didn't get elected, and he wasn't, he didn't fight his way up the political ladder to get to the top so he could fuck everybody coming after him. No, he's born to the job, for Christ's sake, okay? He's probably a nice guy. He looked like he's really tall, very handsome, elderly, I don't know, my age or maybe 70 something. And he looked like a nice guy. And they're throwing mud and garbage at the king and telling him that he should be doing better, and he should be telling the government what to do, and the government isn't showing up, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, That's interesting. That's a tell. And people were saying something. I'm reprising the past. Okay. I'm just about to get to the present. The present is unhinged enough that you need to know something about the recent past to really wrap your head around the present. And they were saying nobody told us. And they were saying we didn't know and we didn't understand. You didn't tell us in a way that we could understand. You told us in a way that we couldn't understand. We didn't understand it. Well, not our fault. It's your fault. So the king shows up and they're like, oh, you're not helping us. And where's the government? And blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, that's a little unhinged. These people are really angry. They're even lashing out at the king and the queen. Okay, that's a thing. And 10 days later, they got another flood in Catalonia. I don't think it was quite as bad, but it was another of the same, right? So now you have two regions that are being destroyed, and now the king has to go back and forth between two regions. And today, I saw news reporting coming out of Valencia, Spain, about how people are rioting, attacking the police because of the poor response to the catastrophe in Valencia. People are saying, oh, it's been 10 days and I still don't know where my elderly father is. Listen, lady, I can tell you where your elderly father is. Okay. I'm not even in Spain right now. I'm not even on the ground. I can tell you exactly where your elderly father is. He's dead somewhere, dead. And throwing mud at the king of Spain isn't going to bring your elderly father back or anybody else of the 250 some odd people that were killed in a modern European country, mind you. 250 people killed in Spain is about as bad as floods in London killing 250 people. How did that happen? These are modern cities. These are modern countries. How does 250 people die in a flood? I don't know. That's weird. That's just weird. We all have cell phones. It wasn't like the buildings are being washed away. You could have just gone from the first floor to the second floor of the same building and survived. And people have cell phones and people have modern communications, and yet 250 people died in Valencia, Spain because of the flooding. Well, as I mentioned in the last video, you know how those people died? They drowned. Fair enough. They drowned because they were in their cars. They're in their cars. And when you understand that, then you reflect, oh yeah, and I was seeing pictures of cars piled up in the streets 2 stories high. Then you understand what the problem was. They were in their cars. They were on the roads, they were in the alleyways, they were on the freeways, they were on the ferries, they were on the bridges, they were wherever in their car. And when you're in your car, you can't get to high ground. You're in traffic. You're on a bridge. And the flood, whatever you are, the floodwaters come and you get floated away. And now you're floating in your car. No one understands that cars float. You think that after years and years of all this climate induced catastrophic flooding and all these images, and they're like cookie cutters of each other. It doesn't matter whether it's in India or some country in Africa or some country in Europe. It doesn't even matter where it is anymore. It's the same story. My wife calls it car soup. It's just all these cars floating down the street, not driving down the street. I'm in my car, floating down the street. Oh, my car turned into a boat, And yeah, cars float. People don't get that. When you're in your car and the floodwaters come, you just float away. Your car isn't going to save you. Your car is now a coffin. You're going to die in your car. Because if you ever open the door of your car to try and get out of your car, now you're in the floodwaters with the cars. And they weigh tons. And you're just going to get smashed and turned into hamburger meat. So, 250 people died in their cars during this flood event. So people are throwing mud at the king, and now, today, escalation, They're fighting with police who have come into these communities that flooded out and trying to restore order. And that kind of makes sense because you want to restore order so you can get on with whatever, fixing things, right? Maybe. Or maybe the politicians want to be able to show up in these communities for photo ops or to hand out bottled water or whatever they think they need to do to save their careers, right? And they don't want to be mobbed like the king was. And until the mobs are sent home and or put in jail or shot and killed or whatever, the politicians and the economists and the religious figures can't show up and you know make the sign of the cross and hand out bottled water and look like they're winners. And they really want to do that, and they can't because the people are angry. Now, here's an interesting question. Because once again, there's lots of parties in motion here. We got the scientists over here, we got the politicians over there, we've got the economists here, we've got the people over there, we've got the religious figures on another track, and they're all going different directions. And so, what are the people mad about? Are they mad at the scientists? Because I guess you could be. You could say, wait, these scientists are talking about climate change all the time, and now we're having climate change. Tell them just to shut up. Well, no, you don't bring climate change by talking about it. Of course, you also don't get rid of climate change by talking about it. Talking about it, it doesn't make any difference because climate change, global heating, whatever you want to call it, is physics. Yeah, that's real. Well, that shit's real. And you're not getting rid of it and it's not going away. And you're also not summoning it like you're summoning some sort of demon by talking about it. That's not how this works. It's a real thing. And it's here and it's not going away. So suck it up, buttercup. You can't blame the scientists. What are they blaming the politicians for? And more particularly, what are they blaming the king for? And I don't think they're really blaming the politicians for not doing enough. Because if you look at these regions, when there's cars piled up in the streets, piled up on top of each other to the second floor, it's pretty obvious you can't do anything about that. It's pretty obvious that this is a major clusterfuck. And it's going to take days, maybe weeks, to get anybody into these communities. It's like what happened in the western part of North Carolina a month or so ago. Washed out the bridges, washed out the roads, washed out 100 miles of road in some of these communities, washed out the electrical poles, and that took out the internet, and that took out the natural gas, and everything is washed out. It's going to take decades and hundreds of billions of dollars, decades and tens of billions of dollars at least to fix these communities, and decades to do it. You don't just rush in there and put down a new road with fresh asphalt and then the first responders roll into your community and hand out bottled water. That ain't how that shit works. They've been 100 years building these communities up in these hills, one road at a time, one bond measure at a time, one $100 million project at a time. And after 100 years, it all gets washed away and it's gone. It's going to take another 100 years to get it back. And even if you throw everything you have at it, it's going to take you tens of years to get it back. And the people in North Carolina were belly aching about where's the government? Who's going to rebuild my home? And I can't even get out of my house. I'm sleeping in a tent in my front yard because I can't even leave my community because there's no roads. Someone's got to fix this. It's like, really? This is a big disaster, I know you know that because you're suffering from it, but just go take that thought a little further. This is a major disaster, and no one's coming to help you because they can't get to you. You can get out, but they have to fly in an army helicopter to hoist you out. But that doesn't mean you're going to get your home back. Doesn't mean you can get your car out. There's no bridges. There's no roads. They're not going to use an army helicopter to lift your car out and all your furniture and everything else that got left behind. They're not going to do that. They'll haul you out and then you can go live in a homeless camp somewhere, but they're not going to do anything they can't bring back your job. They can't bring back your community. They can't bring back your savings. They can't bring back your house and put a proper value on it so you can sell it to the next fool to come along. They can't do any of those things for you. You're done. You're wiped out. You're finished. And the people in Valencia, Spain are blown up. They're done. They're just completely done. Wow. I don't know what they're going to do. And it's a big tourist town, Valencia, Spain, right? Big tourist town. And what is it? Wine and I don't know what all they do there. And so I guess no tourist season. And how many How many missed tourist seasons can there be before the place just turns into a ghost town? I don't know. One? One missed tourist season and the place just turns into a ghost town? Maybe. I mean, they're done. They're done. Valencia, Spain, that whole region is done, or at least big parts of it. And they're angry, and they're throwing mud at the king, and they're threatening the politicians with hangings, and the police show up, and the mobs, and fighting with the police, and the police fighting back. And what is all this about? I think the people of Spain just found out. Valencia and Catalonia, they just found out. They just found out. They've been in denial, and no one told them the global heating was real. I mean, they kind of knew it was a topic of discussion, but a lot of people are saying it's a hoax, or a lot of people are saying we can't do anything about it because economics and politics, political realities, ha ha ha, realities, political realities, ha ha. That's a joke. Figure it out. Figure out why that's a joke. Political realities is a joke, okay? Economic realities is a joke. And yet they'll say, well, we can't do anything about global heating and climate change because, political realities, economics, tourism, I can't do a thing. Love to, but can't do anything to help you people. So that's what they've been hearing. And 2 weeks ago, they found out, right? You know what they found out. They found out it's not a hoax. They found out that, yeah, it will completely destroy your economic system. And you were saying we can't do anything about climate change. My goodness, we can't stop burning fossil fuels. That would disrupt the economy. That would cause loss of jobs. Oh, geez. Oh. Perspire. We can't lose jobs. We can't lose tourism. We can't lose, economic growth. Good Lord. Oh, what would I do if we didn't burn all the fossil fuels? And of course, economic growth is tied to an increase in the burning of fossil fuels, more oil, more natural gas, more electricity, more cars, better cars, faster cars, spend more money, invent more technologies, roll out these technologies, better, faster, bigger. And that's all fossil fuels. You can't do any of that. You can't bigger, better, faster without copious amounts of fossil fuels and increasing amounts of fossil fuels all the time. So when climate change came along, says scientists say, oh, wow, this whole fossil fuel thing. Well, yes, that's going to be a problem. That is a problem. And we need to do something about our consumption of fossil fuels. And the economists and the politicians said, yeah, just shut up about that. No. And the people of Valencia just found out. The people in Western North Carolina just found out. Oh, yeah, they did. And even if they run around and tell you to your face, yeah, climate change, that's a nothing burger. Climate change, that's a hoax. 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours is not a hoax. All your automobiles piled up in the middle of the street, in the width and height of the street, piled up to the second floor of your businesses is not a hoax. That shit's real. And they just found out. Now, they may still run around and say things like, well, climate change, yes, well, very important to think about climate change, but we need economic growth and we have political realities to deal with them. Don't set that aside. We have politicians that need to get reelected and funded and parties in Congress and parties in Parliament. Political realities dictate that we can't do anything about climate change. No, we'll just pray for a miracle, and then boom, 1 year worth of rain in 5 hours, and you just found out you have no economy. And the politicians don't dare show up. The politicians who are telling you that there are political realities that stop us from dealing with climate change. Those politicians who are protecting their jobs and not wanting to deal with this because, they'll get voted out of office. Those guys, they're not going to show up. That's their political calculation. They lied to you about climate change. They say it's a hoax. Yeah, it's not a problem. Just scientists, just dark conspiracies. You know what I mean. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean. And then you find out. And where are the politicians when you find out? They scatter like cockroaches. They vanish. because they don't want to be there when you found out. And the people in Valencia throwing mud at the king, who thought he was doing the right thing. I guess he wasn't really reading the room, was he? The politicians, though, not to be found. I bet the king doesn't go back either. Oh, and I'll bet you the king doesn't go to Catalonia either. I said maybe he was, but probably he's not. And I'll tell you something else. There's not going to be any politician to show up in the west of North Carolina either, because those people found out. And what they found out was they've been lied to. And they're worried that believing the lie, the Santa Claus lie, that Santa Claus will always come and Santa Claus will always be there for you, believing the lie got them killed and destroyed. Now, there isn't much that Spain can do about global heating. Global heating is a global problem. There it is, folks, right there. Global heating is a global problem. Humanity will never tackle global heating. Period. Can't do it. They won't even tackle it in Spain at this point. In fact, they're going to come back and say, "Oh my God, now we must burn even more fossil fuels, because not only do we have to continue to grow jobs and continue to grow the economy and continue to enhance the gross domestic product and continue to attract tourism. Now we have 2 whole regions that have been flattened to repair in time for, oh my God, when does tourist season start?" Have all this work to do. Oh, hair on fire, right? Fossil fuels. We're going to burn fossil fuels. We burned X million barrels of oil a day last year. We're going to do twice that this year because now we have to repair all this damage. Fossil fuels. Bring all the fossil fuels. Put them in the tractors. Put them in the trucks. Put them in the drilling equipment. No, fix the telephone poles. Put the internet back in place, build all these buildings, get all these cars out of here, bring in more cars to replace them, fix the roads, fix the signs, clean the drapes, clean the carpets. Before tourist season starts. Yeah, that's what they're going to want to do. And, it would be really insensitive. Sorry, but this is not the time to talk about climate change. We have people that are suffering. It's really insensitive to talk about climate change. Really? I think they just found out about climate change. Maybe they want to have that discussion now. They're like, "Oh yeah, this is some fucking climate change, isn't it? I mean, you've been saying it's a hoax, and I never hear anything about it, but I just found out. A year's worth of rain in 5 hours? Damn. That sounds like something going on. Can you explain to me what's going on right there? Because I'm thinking that maybe it's some of this climate change stuff people keep talking about." Well, Spain can't do anything about that. About that. What could they do? Well, you could prepare people for the damage that's going to come for them, because it's going to come for all of us, folks. Baby, she's a coming. All right. Yeah, and she's pissed. What's the bumper sticker from the 70s? God is coming, and man, is she pissed. Okay. Works on a lot of levels. Yeah, climate change is coming, and man, is she pissed. Yeah. So, things the government could do for you. Things the king could do for you if you're in Spain, right? Talk to the man. Except he can't really talk about this, but talk to the man. You need to get out of the way of this. You need to live differently. All those cars piled up. Maybe you can do something that doesn't involve so many cars, right? Maybe get yourself off of fossil fuels, because, hey, too many more Valencias and Catalonias and North Carolinas. There's going to be some movement to get, tackle climate change. And how do you tackle climate change? How do you tackle 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours? How do you deal with that kind of bullshit? Well, you stop digging. You stop digging yourself into a hole. And what's the hole we're digging? We're enhancing the greenhouse effect, which is heating the planet. And how do we enhance the greenhouse effect? How does little old you and me do that? Well, our lifestyle emits carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas. And what part of your lifestyle is emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? Let's think about this a second. I don't know. Let me guess. Maybe burning fossil fuels. Because, yeah, that's what's doing it. And you have to burn fossil fuels. Except you don't have to. I mean, you could live your life differently. I mean, you can't. not without help or community or special training or subsidies or government intervention or something. You can't actually, factually live your life differently. And that is a problem because they are going to turn off the fossil fuels. They're either going to do it deliberately in what I call a controlled demolition, meaning they do it on a schedule deliberately. They tell everybody they're going to do that, and then they do it. And it's a constant ratcheting down of the consumption of fossil fuels. And what is the current number? Always going up. Every year it goes up. The current number, though, is about 100 million barrels a day of crude oil. 100 million barrels a day, every day, 365 days a year of crude oil. And that's just the crude oil. That's not the coal and that's not the natural gas. 100 million barrels per day of crude oil. That is the number. That's where we get 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours. And the same thing happened in North Carolina 2 weeks before. And this is just going to get worse, folks. Pretty soon, everyone's going to have a story. Oh, we got wiped out by getting all of our rain in 1 day. All our annual rain in 1 day. What happened to you? Well, we got wiped out by 2 weeks solid of fires. They just burned everything, burned our entire community, burned the trees, burned everything, burned the grasses, burned the animals, burned the people, burned the cars. Everything got burned. 2 weeks solid of fire. And what's your problem? Well, we had a heat wave. We had 6 weeks of temperatures above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And normally we get maybe 3 days a year of 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We had 6 weeks solid without a break. 6 weeks continually over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 12,000 people died. And the houses caught on fire. And the first responders couldn't even deal with the carnage. Oh, yeah. That sounds terrible. And what happened with you? Well, we had a massive food crisis. We thought we had our food coming in, and turns out that the roads got so hot that the asphalt melted and the trucks couldn't come in and deliver food, and then we couldn't get out. And they were bringing in food and water on helicopters because the asphalt was just tar and you couldn't even drive trucks on it. Well, that sounds terrible. And on and on and on and on. Everyone's going to have a story. Valencia has a story today, and they're pissed and they're lashing out. And I think they figured it out. What they figured out is it's real. It's here. It happened to them. They're resentful. They don't know what to do. They're scared. And they've gone straight from out and out denial or soft denial, like, well, it'll be a problem for someone else in the future. Hard or soft denial. They went straight from denial right to fearing for their lives due to climate change. They went from denial to existential dread in 5 hours. 5 hours, my dude. They went from nothing, zero, to 60 miles an hour, full tilt in 5 hours. They went from 0 to 60 in 5 hours. And for humans to go from, I don't care, to, oh my God, I'm finished in 5 hours, what do you expect them to do? These are just people pulled from the general populace, right? These aren't military troops trained to deal with crisis. These aren't scientists who understand on a molecular level what's happening to them. These are just people just pulled from the random population who are going down the freeway thinking they're doing pretty good, going to their job or coming home from school or whatever they were doing, and just got washed away and died. They're just average Janes and Joes just dying in their car on the freeway. And where'd that come from? And why is that happening? And how could that even happen? What physical process on the planet can cause that to happen? They got 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours. How the actual fuck did that even happen? I can say it. Oh yeah, they got 1 year's worth of rain in 5 hours. There you go. Fact. Factoid. Facts. Oh, and if you want visual confirmation, cars piled up in the streets to the second floor of the buildings. But there you go. You can't do that without that kind of torrential rain. You can't do that without turning the city into a river. That's how you float that many cars into the street and pile them up. That's how you do that. Torrential downpour. How does that even happen? Yeah, Bible, right? Noah and the flood in the ark and all that stuff. Oh, that well, of course, that's fiction. But then in Valencia, it happened. How? We don't mind reading about it in the Bible because that's all fiction. But what happens when it actually happens in your front yard? What happens when you go out of your apartment in the morning and you can't even open the front door to step out in the morning to see what the damage is because there's cars piled up against the downstairs door of your apartment complex? Cars and people and refrigerators and furniture and animals and more people. And, okay, but you can't even get out of your front door on the downstairs of your apartment complex. And you go up to the second floor balcony and you can walk out across the cars. That's how you get out. On a second floor balcony, walking across the tops of the cars. That's how you get out. How is that even possible? Unless you see it, you just don't think about it. Unless you've seen 1 year of rain fall in 5 hours, you have no idea what that's about. You have no idea that was even possible. How could there be clouds in the sky that can do that? Where do those clouds come from? Where did that water come from? How did it get up there? And why did it fall on us? And what? Why? Physics. I mean, how is this even possible? When I read about it in the Bible, I say, oh, well, the Bible story is very cute. But it just happened right here in Spain and in North Carolina and other places, right? This is becoming real common, just so you know. If you're in America, you never hear about it. Corporate controlled media. Thank you very much. But yeah, if you start paying attention, it's happening all over the place, man. And you might say, well, yeah, those people, they don't count. They're nobody. They don't have an economic footprint. They're not. I can't even find that place on the map. Who cares? Well, it's data, folks. And when I go on YouTube and I check out the headlines and I see, the Valencia region of Spain got a year's worth of rain in 5 hours. Yeah, that's data. Sorry to break it to you. That's data. And you better start paying attention to some data because I can promise you, you're lying sack of shit politicians. Even when they know these things, they're not going to tell you. And your lying corporate media, they're not going to tell you either. I don't care whether you watch Fox News or CNN. They're not going to say jack about any of this. No, we are not talking about this. Sorry. And that didn't happen. Oh, yes, it did. Sorry to break it to you. And I think the people in Valencia, Spain just found out. And they're bitching and complaining that no one warned them. Hey, excuse me, we've been warning you since 1991. All right. How many IPCC reports have we had? And your government got every one of those things, every single one of them. Your government sent representatives to every single one of these conferences. We're up to 29 COPs, Conference of the Parties. It's all about climate change, by the way. They don't dare tell you that's what they're talking about because you'd probably riot because you're a bunch of twits. But they're having their 29th COP. And where is it? It's in Azerbaijan, some oil exporting country, just like the last one was in Qatar, an oil, natural gas exporting country. And I guess the next 6 will also be in oil exporting countries until finally we have one in Moscow of all the goddamn places. And it's all now controlled by the oil exporting countries, the COPs, the Conference of the Parties. Ooh, sounds so wonderful. Well, they're talking about climate change, except they're not because they're holding these things in oil exporting countries. We've had 29 of them, 30 years of this shit, practically. And 6 IPCC reports. And that's also 30 or more years of this. And, your governments know all about this. Yeah. Trust me, they do. They know all about this. They've known all about this from the get-go. The UN knows all about this. They know all about this shit. And they're not telling you. Well, that's only going to work for a little while. And the people in Valencia, Spain, just found out the hard way. Just like the people in North Carolina just found out the hard way. And it's inevitable that you're going to find out the hard way because of physics. No one is getting out. Everyone is stuck in this same situation and no one is escaping it because planetary physics is planetary. Global heating is global and you're not getting out. And you're going to get whatever you have coming. And the next time you meet people and you'll all compare stories. Well, how did you find out? What made you understand? When did you realize you were hosed? When did you realize you were finished? And they'll all have different stories. And some of them will overlap, and some of them will be terrible, and some of them will be curious, but they'll all have a story, and it'll all come down to physics. It was the rain, it was the fire, it was the cyclones, it was the cyclones after the fire, it was the fire after the cyclone. It was the heat wave, and then the fire, and then the cyclone, and then the flood, and then another heat wave. They'll all have a story. And some will be worse than others, but they'll all have a story. And you'll all sit around and compare notes. And what will you be doing when you're all sitting around comparing notes? Well, you'll be waiting for the possum to cook over the campfire because that's all you've got to eat. Because everything fell apart. Everything went to rat shit. And we are either going to stop burning fossil fuels and do that deliberately and plan our exit and extend our runway as long as we can and get the things done and get the people out of the way of this and put people where they will survive and make sure they have the skills and the equipment and everything else they need to be okay, even as we get off of fossil fuels. We could do that. The governments of the world who have known about this for 30 some odd years, they could do that. They could get together and they could say, all right, now is the time. We're going to shut off the fossil fuels. We're going to stop playing this stupid game about being in denial and pretending it's going to go away. We're going to be adults. We're going to do what we have to do. And we're going to stop fucking around. And we're going to get people out of the way of this thing. We're going to get them resilient and we're going to make them independent and they're going to live without fossil fuels. And if that looks like village life, hey, these could be really great villages, right? You could have your 250, 300 people in your homes and your barns and your animals and your pasture and your water supply and your solar panels and your wind farm and everything else you need for your little village to be okay. And the villages will be 2-3 miles apart, maybe a little less, and everybody will have everything they need individually to get along. And you won't need fossil fuels. You'll have nowhere to go and no one's coming to see you. You're going to manage your crops, manage your lives, birth your own babies, bury your dead. You're going to do all these things. You're going to be just fine. We could do it that way. We could do it that way. This is not even that big of a project. Really, all we have to do is simply imagine life without fossil fuels and then make it so. Now people are going to scream and they're going to holler and they're going to say it's a conspiracy. And they're going to say, wait. 10 years ago, you said it was all a hoax. Now you're telling me I have to give up my car and give up my my supermarket and my Disneyland. And now I have to become a farmer or some stupid shit like that. And 10 years ago, it was all a hoax. And I elected Donald Trump because he was going to make sure it stayed a hoax. And now it's real. Now yes, I expect you to just do the needful. There's shit you got to do now because we're going to shut off the fossil fuels. We could do it that way. And we could deal with the people that don't like it. And if they want to revolt and run downtown and shooting their guns in the air, well, then maybe we have to let them do that. You feel better now? Okay, well, now here's a shovel. Get to work. We could handle it that way. We could have civil wars. When they go running down the streets, firing their guns into the air and shooting everybody because they're angry and terrified and humiliated because it was supposed to be a hoax and it all became real and you found out how bad it really was and you found out the hard way, well, then we could go have our civil war. Kill a bunch of these people. Get them out of the way. I don't know what we're supposed to do, but we have to do something. And it involves not burning fossil fuels, getting off of fossil fuels. Not 100 million barrels of oil a day, not 90 million barrels of oil a day, not 10 million barrels of oil a day, unless we need some millions of barrels of oil a day just to get through this transition. Eventually, 0 million barrels of oil a day, 0 million tons of coal a day, 0 million cubic feet of natural gas a day. 0, not net zero, actual 0. Done. No more. Turn off the equipment. Stop up the pipelines. Pour concrete in them. Whatever you have to do to convince people that this is done. We're done. We could do it that way. We could do it that way. I mean, it wouldn't even be hard for me to come up with a process for doing that. I've thought a lot about it, but mostly anybody who understands our current level of civilization and what we're dependent on, anybody, 3 or 4 people, really 3 or 4 people representing a couple of different domains of knowledge could sit down and in a day, map out the 1,000 things we have to do. And then export that knowledge to every region and every country. And they would have, the particular things they would have to do maybe a little different, or different things to focus on, or different types of problems to solve. But there's about 1,000 things we all have to really do to solve our reliance on fossil fuels for modernity. We can have something like modernity, or we can do nothing. And then we get what I like to call an uncontrolled demolition. Oh, we're all going through demolition. There's all pathways forward lead through one point called demolition. And how do you want to get to that point? Do you want to get there in a controlled way or in an uncontrolled way? And the way we're doing it now, we're getting the uncontrolled version of this demolition. And the people in Valencia can tell you all about it. And they can tell you that it's scary and it sucks because that's what they got. They got an uncontrolled demolition. Well, la-dee-da. How's that denial working out for you? Not too well, is it? Yeah, they opted for an uncontrolled demolition. That's going to be a problem for a lot of people. Now, I can tell you something. There's 8,000 million humans on Earth right now. 8,000 million. This planet, in its current state of disrepair, and all of the damage we've done to it, and all the damage we've done to ourselves, can't probably support more than 8 million people. About 8 million, maybe 100 million. That's 0.1% of the current human population. If we don't have fossil fuels, we can't feed, clothe, house, provide water and medical care and education or any utilities for 99.9% of the current population of Earth. Can't do it. And the dark side of an uncontrolled demolition is you're going to get a 99.9% die-off of humans over a certain fairly short period of time. 10 years, 20, 30? That's a lifetime. Now, I could still be alive. I'm 65. I could live to see. I might live to see, unless I get swept up in it. I could live to see a 99.9% die-off of the human species. Now, that's not extinction. Sounds like it would be a 99.9% die-off. My goodness. If we had a 99.9% die-off of elephants, there might be 2 elephants left. Maybe a dozen elephants left on the entire planet. Now, that's not extinction, but that's pretty rough. And if those elephants aren't all in the same herd and the males can't find the females, well, then they're functionally extinct because they're not going to be able to reproduce. But a 99.9% die-off of the human herd still leaves 8 million people. That's a lot of people, folks. 8 million people, that's a lot of people. And this planet can probably support 8 million people in its current state, and plus losing all of modernity, which we are 100% reliant on for the most part. You will have a hard time finding any group of people of any size at all that's not reliant on modernity to survive every single day, every hour of every day. You'd be hard pressed. And without modernity, meaning fossil fuels, abundant, constantly increasing fossil fuels, 100 million barrels per day and increasing, 99.9% of the people have no story. They have no narrative about how they're going to survive. And the project should be a controlled demolition. Find as many ways as possible for as many people as possible to be able to live without fossil fuels and provide all the necessities for themselves or their group. Food, water, clothing. Just think about that one. Shelter. Think about shelter. How are you going to build shelter without fossil fuels? Without the plywood and the lumber and the roofing and the windows and the doors and the insulation and the what? You don't even know what it takes to build a house. Well, I can tell you all about it. And it's tens of thousands of dollars of processed materials from factories all over the planet go into building a house. All over the planet go into building a house. The rebar from the concrete comes from South Korea. You can't have concrete without rebar. And the concrete itself is manufactured. Concrete is a manufactured material. You don't just dig it out of the ground. It's manufactured out of all kinds of materials. And, if you're going to build with very much concrete, you have to have it delivered in a special truck just for delivering concrete to your site. Building shelter, as we appreciate it now, is a massive undertaking with supply chains that go all over the entire planet. All of it driven by fossil fuels. Without fossil fuels, how do you build shelter? Well, you could look at how people have always built shelter in the past. And they build really nice shelters There are houses, in Europe and England that were built during medieval times that are still standing, and they're cute and gorgeous. Yeah, people live in them. They've been living in them for 1,000 years, and they work perfectly well. They have maintenance issues, whatnot, but they were building houses 1,000 years ago. Whole cities and towns built out of houses 1,000 years ago, and they weren't using any of our modern materials. And they were using hand tools to cut the lumber and cut the willows and dig up the clay and all the things they had to have. They made ricks by hand and fired them. And, well, of course, they had to cut down entire forests to do that. So it's not really sustainable, but they did it. They did it with their hands and the few hand tools and a few domesticated animals to help. They were able to build shelter that people live in still today. And we could simply adopt those kinds of building techniques and build our houses that way. Could do that. Build them out of local materials. Oh, okay. Now there's a problem. If you live in a place where you don't have local materials suitable for building a habitat, like, oh, I don't know, Phoenix, Arizona, well, then you're done. You're kind of screwed up. But on the other hand, there's a lot of buildings that can be torn down, the materials recycled, the nails pulled out and reused, the copper wire, the insulation, the wallboard inside, the siding outside, the roofing, everything can be, if you're really careful tearing down a house, you can use 90% of the materials from a demolished house, more or less. And there are companies that do nothing but recycle houses and sell the wood, use it again. I've bought materials from these companies. Works perfectly well. Now, of course, you need a team of men to tear it down. They need tools. They need time. They still need to be fed. They're not making food for themselves. Someone has to make food for them. And then you need a place to store the materials, organize it, whatever. But you could have materials. And every time you tore down a house, you could recycle the materials. So we could get by with just the construction projects we have floating around. We could get by on all this if we were clever. But that's a controlled demolition, you see. That's teaching people how to recycle houses to make more houses or to add to their existing houses. And if you have power tools, I like my power tools, then you're going to need solar power to charge up your power tools or run your power tools on an extension cord. But that's a controlled demolition. Make sure every community has solar power. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be some. And maybe it's not enough in the winter to run all your lights and do all your cooking, but maybe in the spring, summer, and fall, you can really go to town with your solar power because that's when the sunlight is available. We could figure it out. Are we going to? No, we're not. That's a controlled demolition. The default. If we don't give any thought to this, and we never embrace the fact that this is a shit show, and we have to do things differently, if we never cross that threshold, then we get an uncontrolled demolition. And with an uncontrolled demolition, you end up with whatever you end up with, probably at random. If there's any villages that come out of the uncontrolled demolition, then it's because people got together and decided they needed to do that to survive. And so they did it. If there's any governments that come out of the uncontrolled demolition, then it's random. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. They can't figure it out. So maybe the ones that got lucky, they end up being governments and they're able to help the people. If we end up with any technology after an uncontrolled demolition, well, then it's just luck. It's whatever could survive lack of fossil fuels, or maybe someone figured out how to keep the internet working in some limited area of the planet. And, maybe they learned how to fix cell towers so the cell phones would work for limited, purposes. And, but it'll all be random. Some group of people figured it out, not with any help, not with any planning. They just got lucky. They had somebody who was an electrical engineer and understood how to route power and how to, safely work with electricity. And they had people that had solar panels, so they had electricity and they had batteries, and they just kind of figured it out on their own. That's what you get with an uncontrolled demolition. Just figure it out on your own. And if you don't have the right people and you don't have enough time, or you're Phoenix, Arizona, and you got no resources, and it's too hot all the time, and people just die and they die in place and they can't survive and they can't work together because they're dead. Well, then you didn't figure it out. randomly. You just couldn't figure it out. That's an uncontrolled demolition. Yeah, and with an uncontrolled demolition, maybe we end up with some, fraction of our current population. With a controlled demolition, which would be the smart thing to do, we would end up with more than a fraction of the current population. I don't know. What do you think? What would you rather have? But if you're going to have a controlled demolition, you have to embrace the fact that fossil fuels are causing damaging climate change and global heating. You just have to embrace that. You just have to say, well, I guess that's a thing. Uh, I have no clue. Does anybody else have any idea what we should do now? And if you were on board the Titanic and the Titanic hit an iceberg, at some point you just have to say, yep, I guess we're sinking. I don't understand that. I can't do anything about that. I wish somebody would fix it, but they're not. So I guess we're going down, and this ship is going to the bottom of what? The Atlantic, I guess. Wow, I don't want to be around when that happens. So what can we do? Anybody got any ideas? That's kind of the point you're at right now. You have to accept your situation, and then, yeah, you have to do something. Now, the people in Valencia and North Carolina and all the other places that are going to get whacked, they're going to go straight from denial right to outrage. And their outrage is going to be driven, it is being driven by fear, anxiety, paranoia, all kinds of mental derangement brought about by the very thought that their world could be destroyed in 5 hours, which seemed impossible the week before, which sounds apocalyptic to them, as if they have been abandoned by God, as if the world is suddenly filled with demons influencing the weather. A year's worth of rain in 5 hours just seems impossible. It just seems, how can you even talk like that? Well, it happened. Now what are you going to do? Now what? The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Well, it's sinking. So don't worry about that anymore. It's going down. Now what? You got a plan? I know you didn't think it was possible to have a plan like that, getting off the Titanic. But now you need to have a plan. It's unfair. You bought a first class ticket. The ship was supposed to be unsinkable. It's sinking anyway. So what are you going to do now? And that's, maybe you opt for a controlled demolition. You get on the lifeboat. You put the people in the lifeboat. You give them food. You give them water. You give them blankets, and you launch the boat off the side of the ship, and you push it away from the boat. That's a controlled demolition. Bye. Enjoy your cruise or whatever it just became. Or you could do an uncontrolled demolition. Nobody gets in a lifeboat. Nobody launches a lifeboat. Nobody even knows about a lifeboat. There's no talk about lifeboats. Everyone's running around on the Titanic trying to find some way to make the ship stop sinking, but the ship is sinking because physics. And so that's it, uncontrolled demolition. And if anybody survives, they survive on accident. One person got lucky. Maybe they got lucky. A lifeboat accidentally launched itself. Whatever. And they accidentally, when they're running around, fell off the ship and landed in the lifeboat. Yes, it's weird. It's random, but that's what they did. And so later, when the ship sank, there was one person in one lifeboat on accident. That's what you get with an uncontrolled demolition. One person in one lifeboat on accident. Or we could do something else. And, the only thing I can come up with in the category of something else is village life, as I've just described it. You have to be self-sufficient. And I don't mean self-sufficient like every man for himself. I mean, every village has to become self-sufficient. For food, for water, for housing, for security, for medical care, for education, everything. Every village of some size, and it has to be bigger than one person. It probably has to be bigger than 50 people to be viable. So what, 150 people, 200 people, 300 people? Some village of some size has to have enough skills and human labor and human ingenuity and knowledge and enough men to do heavy work and enough women to give birth to children and take care of everything, keep the village, stable and cohesive. Everyone has to pull together. Even the little children have to manage. And if you have enough people and they're working together and you're innovative enough and you get lucky, there's still that element of luck, then you end up with a village, and the village is viable, And the people know what they're supposed to do, and they can do it, and they agree to do it. And now you've had your controlled demolition. Are we going to do that? I don't think so. That's what we need to do. That is the work of the moment. You don't know that. You don't believe that. You don't buy that at all. You're the equivalent. Everyone here is, and I'm not even pointing fingers and making blame. This is just how you've been left. You've been left by the deniosphere. The politicians and the economists and the religious figures, they've been lying to you. They've been telling you, don't have to worry about this. This is a hoax, or this is caused by someone else, or this is not going to affect us, or it's going to take hundreds of years. Don't worry about it. Okay. They've just been lying flat out to you, like parents lied to their children about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. They're lying to you, lying to your face. And eventually you're going to find out. It's not your fault that they lied to you. It's their fault that they lied to you. Maybe it's your fault that you believe them because you know you can't. It's your fault that you didn't listen to the scientists when you had a chance, because this is in their wheelhouse. It's your fault that you didn't get an advanced degree in mathematics and physics. No, that's not your fault. But you have to be careful who you choose to be your leader. You have to be careful who you're going to believe. And the scientists have no dog in this fight. I can tell you that right now. I gain nothing from this talking to you. I don't have any Patreon. No one buys me a coffee. Nothing. I get nothing. I have no political aspirations. This is not a business model. I'm just wasting my time here. I'm spending my time because I feel like I have to say something. Got nothing. I got nothing in this. You get everything that you want from me, and you do what you want to do with it. I don't even care. I'll never meet you. I'll never meet any of these people who are my subscribers. I'll never meet anybody who's ever listened to these videos. I can't help you with your transition to a fossil fuel-free life. I can't help you build your village. I can't help you ideate your village. I can't help you with your water problems. I can't help you with your food supply problems. I can't help you get ahead of this. And when the year's worth of rain comes in 5 hours, I can't help you with that either. Of course, it's way too late. No one can help you, not even the king. You just have to start dealing with it and do what you can now. And when the opportunity comes to get together with other people and start planning your life without fossil fuels, don't walk away from the chance. Have that discussion. It'll be tough. And people will lie to you. And they'll say, well, solar power was going to save us. And it's not. You're going to have to live without fossil fuels. That means no one's going to deliver food to your supermarket down the street. And no one's going to deliver gasoline to the service station down the street. And no one's going to fix your car when it breaks down. And no one's going to deliver electrical power to your house from the grid. And no one's going to deliver water to your tap in your kitchen and your bathroom. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to figure these things out quickly. And in lieu of solving those problems, which you probably can't, you need to have the discussion ahead of time and start talking about a controlled demolition. How do we manage this sort of systemic catastrophic change? Change management. Change management. How would we get all the people off the Titanic into a limited number of lifeboats? What happens if there's not enough lifeboats? What do we tell these other people? Change management. I can't help you with that. I'm not going to be there. And even if I was there, you probably wouldn't listen to me. You're going to have to manage that. When the time comes for you to grapple and tackle and grab by the horns, change management, I hope you're ready. I hope you've been thinking about this. I hope you've been planning for the uncontrolled demolition, because that's all you're going to get. It'd be nice if we had a controlled demolition. Maybe if enough people like the people in Valencia figure out that they're basically screwed, they're basically fucked, maybe they'll start demanding a controlled demolition. Maybe. I don't know. I doubt it. It'd be smart. They've seen the handwriting on the wall. They should try to get out of the way of this thing. Will they? Yeah. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Why? I don't know. They're not going to do that. They don't have the leadership. All they know is that now it's possible for 1 year of rain to land on their head in 5 hours. That's all they know. They don't know what that means. They don't know what to do about that. They don't know where to go. They don't know who to talk to. And the government doesn't want to talk to them right now because they just found out. And the government doesn't want to talk about that. Yep. Now you know. Now you know it's true. And we've known for 30 years. In fact, Spain will be sending a delegation to COP29 in Azerbaijan to talk about climate change. Spanish government will do that. Oh, and they'll probably even mention what happened in Valencia and blah, blah, blah. They'll probably do that. Will they come back and tell the people what to do and how to get ready? Nope. Not going to do it. But 1 year of rain fell in Valencia in 5 hours. And the cars were piled up 2 stories high in the streets. That's data. It's a coming. No, man, it's a coming. Everyone's going to have a story eventually. And let's hope you're telling your story to the little children collected around your feet, asking, tell us again, Grandpa, Grandma, how our village came together and how we solved our problems and how we learned to get along and how we learned to work together. Tell us again, Grandma, Grandpa. Tell us the story. Tell us the story. We want to hear it again. Will that be you? Or will that be somebody else? That's your choice. That's your choice, isn't it? 1 year of rain in 5 hours. Data. It's coming. That's it for me. Again, drop us a like. And if you want to hear more of this kind of stuff, you'll want to subscribe because I'll come back on here once in a while. And as the years roll along and as these disasters pile up, I'm on here more often probably than I would like to be. So we'll see what happens. Once again, I don't really care about the disasters. I'm not here for the doom porn. I'm here for the behavior. What are people doing? What are they thinking? How are they acting? And yeah, more on that in this space to come. Pretty sure. I got things to do. So do you. Get on with your day, and I'll be back.